for 8 straight summers. My parents packed my suitcase, drove me to my aunt's house, kissed my forehead like they were doing me a favor, and then left so my younger brother could enjoy the real family vacation without me. The 8th summer was the one that finally broke something I could never repair. I still remember watching their SUV disappear through the dust, my mother's hand waving through the rear window while my brother pressed his face against the glass, grinning because he already knew where they were going. I never did. I was only told it's expensive or, "You'll have more fun with Aunt Linda." The truth arrived by accident. My aunt left her phone on the kitchen table while she watered her garden. It buzzed with photos from the family trip, my parents standing beneath waterfalls, my brother on a horse at sunset, matching t-shirts with the words "The Three Adventurers." 3, not 4. I wasn't forgotten. I had been edited out. I stared at those pictures until the screen dimmed, feeling something colder than sadness settle into my chest. Anger burns hot. This didn't. It froze. It became quiet. When my aunt came back inside, she saw my face before she saw the phone. She didn't lie. "They've been doing this every year," she whispered, sinking into the chair beside me. "Your mother asked me not to tell you." Outside, children laughed somewhere down the street. A lawn sprinkler clicked back and forth. The ordinary sounds made the silence inside me feel impossibly loud. That evening my father called. "Having fun?" he asked cheerfully over the speaker. I looked at the framed photos on my aunt's wall. Every birthday she'd attended because my parents had been too busy. Every school recital she'd recorded because they had missed it. "I'm fine," I answered. He sounded relieved. Not because I was happy, because I wasn't asking questions. That was the moment I understood the role I'd been assigned in my own family. I wasn't the difficult child. I wasn't the forgotten one by accident. I was simply the sacrifice that made everything easier. Someone had to be left behind. They had decided it would always be me. They thought the story ended with another quiet summer at my aunt's house. They had no idea I had already stopped waiting for a seat in their family. My name is Emily, and by the time I turned 18, I had spent more years adapting to disappointment than expecting love. My parents never called me unwanted, but neglect has a language of its own, spoken through empty seats at school plays, forgotten birthdays, and excuses polished until they sounded almost believable. My younger brother, Ryan, never had to ask for attention because it found him naturally, wrapping around him like sunlight, while I learned to survive in the shade. If anyone noticed the imbalance, it was my aunt. She never criticized my parents in front of me, yet she quietly filled every space they left empty. She taught me how to bake bread when no one came to my science fair, sat beside me during thunderstorms because she remembered I hated lightning, and celebrated report cards with homemade dinners instead of expensive gifts. She never tried to replace my mother. She simply showed me what consistent love looked like. At home, I became invisible by being dependable. I earned top grades without reminders, handled my own paperwork, found part-time jobs, and solved problems before anyone realized they existed. My independence became convenient for everyone else. Each success gave my parents another reason to believe I needed less from them, while every achievement Ryan made became another family celebration. The strange part was that I stopped resenting my brother long before I stopped hurting. He had been raised to believe attention was normal, just as I had been raised to believe earning it was never enough. That realization changed everything. I stopped chasing approval that had always come with conditions and quietly started building a future where my worth wouldn't depend on anyone. Finally noticing I existed. The older I grew, the quieter the favoritism became, almost polished enough to look ordinary from the outside. It lived in small moments that disappeared before anyone else could question them. My parents never asked if I wanted to join their weekend plans. They simply assumed I had something else to do. Then they would turn to Ryan with warm smiles and ask where he wanted to eat or which movie he wanted to see, waiting patiently for his answer while I cleared the dinner plates. At family gatherings, relatives praised my grades for a few polite seconds before the conversation drifted back to Ryan's soccer, trophies or his latest hobby. My father would rest a proud hand on his shoulder his voice carrying across the room. When I spoke, conversations seemed to pause only long enough for someone to change the subject. Even holiday photographs told the story. Ryan always stood between our parents, their arms naturally around him. I was the one holding the camera or standing slightly off to the side after someone casually said, "Scoot over a little." The final cut came during my high school graduation planning. My mother glanced over the ceremony invitation, sighed softly, and asked whether the event could be recorded instead. Ryan's regional championship game had been scheduled for the same afternoon. No one argued. No one even looked embarrassed. I folded the invitation back into its envelope, smiled as if I understood, and quietly decided that if my biggest milestones could be treated as optional, then one day my absence would become permanent, and they would be the last people to know where my life had taken me. The decision wasn't born out of one dramatic argument. It arrived the way winter does, slowly, quietly, until one morning you realize the season has already changed. A week before graduation, I came home early from work to pick up a folder I had forgotten. The house was unusually quiet. As I walked past the kitchen, I heard my parents talking. "She'll figure things out," my father said in the calm voice he used whenever he dismissed a problem. "Emily has always been independent." My mother answered with a tired laugh. "She doesn't really need us the way Ryan does." Neither sentence was cruel on its own. Together, they explained my entire childhood. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand tightening around the folder until the edges bent beneath my fingers. They weren't discussing me with guilt or regret. They sounded grateful that I expected so little. My independence, the trait everyone admired, had become permission to stop showing up for me. I walked back out the front door without letting them know I had been there. That evening, I accepted the job offer from an engineering firm nearly 1,000 miles away. I signed the lease on a small apartment, arranged my move, and changed every mailing address myself. The only person I told was my aunt. She looked at me for a long moment before quietly nodding. "They'll be hurt," she said. "I know," I replied. "But they've had 18 years to notice they were losing me." Graduation came and went exactly as I expected. My aunt cheered the loudest from the audience. My parents arrived late from Ryan's tournament, just in time for photographs they assumed would mark the beginning of my adult life. They didn't realize they were taking the last family picture they would have for years. By sunrise the next morning, my car was already heading toward another state, carrying everything I owned and every piece of myself they had never bothered to know. Leaving wasn't my revenge. It was simply the first move that made every move afterward possible. Before graduation, I had already learned something my parents never expected from me. The less attention people pay to you, the easier it is to build a life they know nothing about. I had saved nearly every paycheck from my part-time jobs, earned scholarships that covered most of my tuition, and accepted an engineering position with a company that valued performance more than family connections. Every document was in order before I packed a single box. I rented my apartment under my own name, transferred my bank accounts to a local branch, updated my mailing address, and listed my aunt as my emergency contact. I kept my social media dormant, declined photo tags, and politely asked new coworkers not to share personal details online. None of it was secretive. It was simply private. My aunt respected the decision without asking unnecessary questions. She handed me a small envelope containing copies of my birth certificate, medical records, and other documents she had quietly kept safe over the years. "You'll need these more than memories," she said. She was right. I didn't block my parents' numbers or write dramatic farewell letters. Silence was far more powerful than confrontation. If they called, they would reach voicemail. If they mailed something, it would be returned. If they asked relatives where I had gone, no one honestly knew beyond the state I had moved to. For the first time in my life, every important decision belonged to me alone. My parents had spent years assuming I would always be waiting for them to notice me. Instead, I built a future so complete that when they finally decided to look, there was nothing left for them to interrupt. Only a life that no longer had room for people who had treated me as optional. 4 years passed before they found me. Not because I was hiding, but because they had never learned enough about my life to know where to begin looking. By then, I had been promoted twice, bought a modest home, and built friendships that slowly became the family I had always imagined. My neighbors knew my name. My coworkers celebrated my birthdays. For the first time, I wasn't the dependable backup. I was someone's first call, someone's trusted friend, someone's chosen family. The knock came on a rainy Saturday morning. When I opened the door, my parents stood on the porch, older than I remembered. My father clutched a folded piece of paper with my address. My mother looked past me into the warm light of the house, as if expecting to find the daughter she had left behind. Instead, she found a stranger who looked peaceful. "We've been trying to find you," she whispered. "I know," I replied. There was a long silence broken only by rain tapping against the porch railing. My father cleared his throat. "Why didn't you tell us where you went?" I looked at them without anger, only clarity. "For 8 summers," I said quietly, "you practiced living without me." Neither of them spoke. "You taught me that people make room for what matters to them. I finally believed you." The words landed harder than any accusation could have. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't enough to rewrite birthdays, graduations, or summers that had already belonged to someone else. I wished them well, thanked them for making the trip, and gently closed the door. The revenge wasn't watching them walk back to their car in silence. It was realizing I no longer needed them to regret what they had done in order for me to be happy. My life had already become everything they never thought I could build, and they had arrived 4 years too late to be part of it. News of their visit traveled through the family faster than I expected. My aunt never defended me with speeches or accusations. When relatives called, asking how things had become so distant, she answered with the same quiet truth every time. "They didn't lose her in 4 years," she said. "They lost her 1 summer at a time." No one argued with that. A few relatives reached out to apologize for things they had overlooked. Others admitted they had noticed the pattern, but assumed it was none of their business. Their honesty didn't erase the past yet. It reminded me how easily neglect becomes invisible when it happens in small, ordinary moments instead of dramatic ones. My parents' reputation didn't collapse overnight. They were still respected, still invited to gatherings, still seen as decent people. The real consequence wasn't public embarrassment. It was that every family celebration now carried an empty chair they couldn't explain without telling the truth. Every graduation photo on the wall ended with mine. Every holiday reminded them that there were no new memories to frame. As for Ryan, he called me a month later. For the first time in our lives, we spoke as adults instead of children assigned different roles. He admitted he had spent years believing I simply preferred being alone. I told him I never had. When the call ended, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's refusing to keep paying the price for someone else's choices. The people who truly value you won't need to be convinced to include you. They'll make room without being asked. If my story means anything, I hope it's this. Never confuse being overlooked with being unworthy. The moment you stop begging for a place at someone else's table, you become free to build one where everyone who sits beside you actually wants you there. In the years that followed, I stopped measuring my life by what my parents had failed to give me. I measured it by what I had built instead. The quiet mornings in a home I had earned. The friends who showed up without being asked. The holiday table filled with laughter that never felt conditional. Those became the milestones that mattered. My parents reached out from time to time. A birthday card, a holiday message, an invitation to visit. I answered with kindness, but never with urgency. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as returning to the place that broke you. It simply means refusing to let the past decide who you become. Ryan and I slowly rebuilt something that resembled a real relationship. Without our childhood roles standing between us, we discovered we had more in common than either of us had realized. We couldn't rewrite the years we had lost, but we could choose not to lose the years ahead. My aunt lived long enough to see me truly happy. On the day I handed her the keys to the guest room in my house, she smiled the same gentle smile she had worn all those summers ago. "You finally have a home," she whispered. "No," I answered, taking her hand. "I finally know what one feels like." Sometimes I think about those 8 summers and wonder how different my life might have been if my parents had chosen differently. Then I look around at the people who chose me without hesitation, and the question quietly fades away. My revenge was never making them feel abandoned. It was proving that the child they treated as an afterthought could grow into a woman whose life was so full of love, purpose, and peace that their approval became the one thing she no longer needed. The greatest victory isn't making the people who overlooked you look back. It's reaching a place where you never have to look back at all.